and welcome to Spotlight Indie, part of our Indie Big Weekend. We are doing a live writer sprint for the next hour and a half. I am your host, H.L. Tinsley, the diabolical genius behind this weekend, and currently standing in for Fraser Armitage. I am being joined by some wonderful indie author guests who have come to chat, chill, and answer some questions in the comments. So we're going to go around and do some quick introductions before I explain how our writing sprints work. So we're going to kick off with the wonderful Mr. Tim Hardy. Tim, how are you and what have you been up to recently?
Very well, thanks, Holly. Yeah, I've been working on a few different projects, but the one I'm probably going to be focusing on today during the writing sprint is I'm putting together an omnibus edition for the ebook of my Viking fantasy series, The Brotherhood of the Eagle. So I'm trying to get that formatted and ready. So that's my current big project.
Fabulous. We're also joined today by the wonderful Tru Skies. Tru, how are you?
Not too bad, thank you. A bit windy here.
Yes, very much worried about being blown away as I sit in my very flimsy shed to record this, but hopefully it will all be good. Tru, tell us a little bit about what you're going to be working on today.
So I'm working on my current draft of my new project, which is called The Chosen One Con. I'm getting quite close to the end of this damn draft now, so I'm kind of getting very close to the climax. It's all getting very exciting and sinister. So that's what I'm going to be working on today.
Awesome. And finally, introducing our third guest for today. It is the very wonderful Ronit. Hi, how are you?
I'm doing good. Thank you for having me here.
No worries at all. So tell us a little bit about what you're going to be working on.
So I have a short story that I thought of 2 months ago and I've been putting it off. So I'm going to be working on that today.
Amazing. I am also going to be working on a short story today. I am going to be working on something that is based on some free writing. Now, this is something I want to chat a little bit about before we go into the sprint, because free writing is something that I do very regularly. For anyone who has never done it, it is literally sitting down and it is a stream of consciousness coming out of your brain and onto the paper. And you end up with all sorts of ridiculous nonsense, as I proved yesterday. But what happens is you occasionally get these little nuggets of genius or what could potentially be genius. And you could pull all sorts of short stories. And I was wondering, is free writing something that you guys have ever done to try and invoke inspiration or to get ideas? Tim, is it something that you put into your kind of writing process?
The honest answer to that is no. It isn't. I'm a meticulous planner and plotter and all the rest of it. So I'm quite rigid in my writing. But having said that, I've definitely encountered places where it's been difficult to progress a project or a novel, or difficult to get, a story to exactly where I want it to go. So yeah, I'm interested to see what if you're doing free writing, what comes out of it. I can see that unlocking the subconscious side of things might be quite a good way to sort of break through. So yeah, interesting idea.
Yeah. Tru, what about you? Is it something you kind of do as part of your kind of writing journey, writing experience?
I'm definitely with Tim on this one. I'm very meticulous about planning what I'm going to write, like bullet points. So, but it does sound like a really interesting idea. It'd be something I'd like to experiment with in the future for sure.
Rod, do you free write at all?
For my books, no, but I have used free writing to process certain emotions and certain ridiculous thoughts that are just bothering me. I need to get them out somewhere. So free writing actually helps with that. And you're right. Like sometimes you do get like bits of inspiration that might turn into a story later on.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the key word there is ridiculous thoughts as well, because that is very much what it is for me. I do sit down sometimes and worry about the things that come out of my brain. But I think it's a good practice, something I would recommend people to get into. We have got a couple of familiar faces in the chat already. So Mr. Fraser Armitage, who is currently having a break from hosting this weekend, doing a fantastic job of it as well. Hello, Fraser. Fraser's also just put that he only writes ridiculous things. We know that categorically not to be true. Fraser writes some fantastic things. And then we've also got Jamie as well, coming to do some write-along. So for those of you who are in the audience who haven't done a write-along with us before, I'm going to explain how it works. It is a very simple, no stress, supportive way to just spend a bit of time with some fellow authors, work on some projects. We do 3 writer sprints of 25 minutes each. When they start, we will put up a countdown on the screen so that you can keep an eye on your timings. We also have some lovely background music, which has been supplied by the wonderful Alan Stroud. And at the end of it, we'll all come back together. We'll talk a little bit about what we've done. We can troubleshoot any queries or sticking points that we've got, and just basically congratulate each other on being awesome and having done really productive work over the sprint. So I think we're pretty much coming up on time for our first 25 minutes. Do let us know what you're working on in the comments if you are watching and writing along. We would like to know all about your projects. And I think, yeah, that's probably a good time for us to get started. So I'm going to pop the first countdown up on the screen. Best of luck, everybody. And I hope you hit your word counts. There's no word counts. What am I talking about? Let's do this.
Let's go.
Okay, this is your 1 minute warning. So we're going to be having a bit of chat in a moment. So we've got 1 minute just to wrap up this first sprint. There we go, guys. First sprint session over and done with. How was that for everyone? Does everyone feel like they got some productive stuff done?
Yeah, I wrote about 850 words, which is quite a lot, I feel, for a half an
That's
hour sprint.
that is quite impressive. Tim, how about you? How did you find that?
Mine sounds less productive. I've been working on the short stories that are going into the omnibus to sort of split up the different novel sections. And I've spent that entire 25 minutes trying to get dates consistent between all four stories and then working out whether I need to write them as numbers, words, or both. And I've gone with both, but not for the same thing. So, yeah, believe it or not, this is why novel writing and stuff takes so long, because you end up losing half an hour of your life just trying to work out how the headings should appear in individual short stories. But I'm happy I've done it, and for the next couple, I can actually get into the actual stories themselves now.
Yeah, yeah. Tru, how about you? How did you get on?
Yeah, I did about 430 words. This isn't too bad for me.
Nice, nice. I managed 422, so similar to Tru. I'm pretty happy with that. Especially considering this is the first time I've actually written since the end of August, because I just have been so busy with doing spotlight stuff and editing and other bits and bobs. I haven't actually had time to sit down and write. And when I knew I was going to be doing today, I did have a bit of a panic, because I thought it's going to take me a good half an hour at least to get even one word down. So 400 plus, I'm very happy with that. People in the chat, let us know how you did, what you were working on, how you got on. Talking of writing breaks, this is something I think is a bit of an author challenge. So I'm going to throw this out to you guys just to get your input on it. If you have had a break from writing, as we all need to now and again, what are some of the techniques that you use to get yourself back into that mindset, to get back into the zone?
Panic.
Aside from panic, Tru.
That's funny because I was going to go with blind terror, so maybe there is something in that.
I use writing prompts, but not online. The first thing I wrote after a break was actually for a writing competition on Reddit. It was a flash fiction competition, and whatever the subject matter is, because it's so disconnected from everything else that I'm writing, it's like a refresher for even the writing side of my brain.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's a good way to do it as well. We've just had Thomas has popped into the chat. Hi, Thomas. Speaking of the Reddit competitions, I seem to remember from memory that Thomas does a couple of those as well. So I think that's something that a lot of people use to try and kind of get back into the groove of it, so it were. So I am very happy that I have managed to do some writing. What I have not managed to do, see how I segue so smoothly, is release any books recently. So we're going to talk a little bit now about, Ronit, you've had a book out this year, which we featured on Spotlight Indie, which I'm going to get you to tell us a little bit about. So this is Island of the Dying Goddess. But for those of you who haven't heard of it, there is a review on the website. You can go and have a look. But what was really interesting about this book, because I mean, my husband read it and he absolutely loved it, is the level of intricacy and detail when it comes to things like pantheons and world building. So tell us a little bit about the
Sorry, you froze exactly when you had to ask the question. So
Oh no, I was so brilliantly put as well. Yeah, I was just basically probably very ineloquently explaining that what we really appreciated about the book was the intricacy of the world building and the pantheons behind it, and kind of the history of the world. So just tell us a little bit about how that came about and what inspired it.
okay, I don't know if you've read the preface of the book, but it was not a positive event in my life that led to me writing this book. Like there are books that come to you like shining rays of inspiration, but this book was more like a life jacket in the middle of the sea for me. And just every day that I wrote this book was like me kind of making my way towards shore. And a lot of these visualizations that are in the book, and a lot of it is pretty horrific. That's why I've even like there are a lot of horror elements throughout the book, body horror, and like the pantheons that you talk about are not like your beautiful deities, but they're all twisted uh, disfigurations of gods, and like something that you would look up to, and that all comes from this traumatic event. And mentioned it in the preface. It's basically my dad had a stroke in 2023, and it's like when you have a loved one that goes through something like that, it can be quite stressful, not just for the person who's going through it, but also the people around them, because he was in the hospital for about 3 months or 4 months, and I would go there almost every day. And I'm not just seeing my father suffering, I'm seeing the other patients in the hospital as well, who are in different levels of pain and whatever. And coping with this is not very easy. Forget about coping, it's even difficult to articulate what I was going through. And like one of the things that my therapist keeps telling me is that find creative ways to channel your thoughts, and writing is one way that I channel my thoughts. And I'm a very meticulous planner, like Tim, like Trudy, but this is one book that I discovery wrote from start to finish. And everything that's in the book is essentially just picking up whatever turmoil is in my brain and just visualizing it into something that reflects it. And many of the reviews have even pointed out how the how the visual, not the visuals, but also the way these themes connect with the plot can be connected to the effects of a stroke, or the mental reactions to seeing someone go through this, and how why the characters behave in this in a particular ways, because I was also behaving in a particular way in response to what I was going through. So it's not a planned book, but I think it all fell into place. And then of course I did put in a year worth of effort, just making sure that it's fallen into place, but it needs to make sense as well. And yeah, it was a lot of a patchwork, kind of like one of the characters, but in the end it worked out.
I think that's a wonderful analogy as well, talking about that using writing as a lifeline. I think that is something that most people who do write can relate to. I mean, not everything you write is going to be connected to you personally, but I think when personal, it can feel almost comforting story, just to kind of bit of an issue with internet connection. I don't know if anyone else is experiencing it, so our screens are jumping a little. As far as I could tell, sound is working okay, so hopefully you can hear us all right. But if we do flicker in and out, do bear with us. We apologise for that. And yeah, I mean, we really enjoyed the book over at Spotlight Indie. There is a review that people can go and read, and obviously they can find out more about it. But talking of promoting indie works, which we love to do here, very quickly before we jump into our next sprint, Tru, your website, Read Indie Fantasy, one of our wonderful friends who has been on the channel before, you're actually doing quite a lot of work at the moment to spotlight indie authors. So tell us about your campaign you've got coming up.
So we've got a campaign starting in November for the entire month of November, which is called A Month of Rain and Reads. And it's basically just all about celebrating indie. So we're going to have reviews, guest posts, interviews, pretty much everything, just to spotlight indie and self-published authors. It's going to be pretty big. We've already had so many submissions already that we've got enough for multiple posts every day for the entire month of November. So it's going to be pretty big.
Fantastic. So there you go. Clearly, if anyone wants something to work on, take a look at Tru's wish list of things that she needs for the is it Rain and Reads? Sorry.
Yeah, A Month of Rain and Reads.
Rain and Reads. So yeah, and see what it is that Tru and the team are after. It is probably about time for us to jump into another sprint now. So if everyone is ready and raring to go, we will do our next 25 minutes. And we'll get started with a bit of chat. Okay, we are in the last minute of the second sprint, so bringing this one to a close in the next couple of seconds. Okay, we're going to bring everybody back to chat through how we found that second sprint. Does everyone feel like they're getting into the groove of it a bit more?
Yep.
Yeah. Yeah. I always feel like the second one is a little bit more of a productive one for me. It feels like you need the first one, don't you, really, to relax into it. Got a couple of people who have joined us now in the audience as well. Hello to Mark. Nice to see you again. Let us know what you're working on, Mark, or if you're just here to watch and join in on the chat. Fraser has let us know that he's doing a bit of editing. Again, if you're watching, let us know how you got on with that second sprint. Tim, progress reports. How's it going with your project?
Update from my camp. Yeah, good actually. I'm rereading a short story that I wrote about 3 years ago, and I've not really done anything with it since. But it's one I'm going to include in the omnibus. So I'm just reading it through to make sure that it's consistent as I've written the main series. There's nothing kind of gone out of line. And yeah, it's a story called The Foundling. So it's basically Johan Jokelswood's origin tale, effectively, and also it shows how Etta starts to sort of control things in the Riesberg clan from quite an early stage. So I think for fans of the series, these sort of stories be quite good because they kind of help flesh out the world, really. So yeah, it's reading it. I'd almost forgotten I'd written it. So it's one of those stories that's surprising me as I'm coming across bits that I'd forgotten I'd written originally, which is quite good fun. So yeah, making good progress. That should get it done in the next sprint, I think.
Brilliant. So Jamie's done 500 words, which I know for a fact is excellent. So well done for 500 words. One of the things I actually do find interesting, Tim, is that you do a lot of short stories set in the same world as your novels, which is something I've never tried before, and I'd be very interested to give that a go. I don't, I've not avoided it, but I've never just felt that kind of inkling of, there's a short story in this. I don't know, Tru and Ronit, if you have ever pulled short stories out of your novels. Is that something you have done or something you would do?
I have technically done that. I did a short story collection. It was like 15 different stories based on the world in my Cruel Gods books. Because my Cruel Gods books has like, God, I can't remember now. It has 12 different domains. So I wrote a story each set in each different domains, and then offered it for free as a reader magnet, and also you can buy it for a couple of quid or whatever. And it was really good fun to do that actually, because it lets you explore those worlds in more depth and kind of learn more about it. So yeah, I definitely recommend giving it a go.
In 22, I challenged myself to write one short story every month, and each of them was set in the world that on the continent of Adeva, which is the setting for my upcoming trilogy. I haven't revealed the name of the trilogy or the books yet because I'm still figuring it out. But this was like a world building exercise which let me get a feel of the world, get a feel of the culture, and then when I got into writing the first book, which I'm about a little over halfway through, everything came to me pretty readily built because of the short stories. And I did publish 4 of them in an anthology called Abandoned by the Gods, which I too use as a reader magnet. So yeah, it's fun. It's good practice for your writing, and it helps with world building. So like more than just 2 birds, 1 stone.
Yeah, I mean, this is obviously something that I need to get into, clearly.
You do. I was just going to add, actually, that when I first started writing, I thought, well, novels are the thing you buy in shops. So I presume you need to write a novel because that's what I'm trying to learn how to do. So I started writing novels originally, and I only came to short stories quite late on, probably 2022 was the first time I actually tried to write one. And I really wish now I'd learned my craft by writing short stories. Partly like you said, run it to sort of immerse yourself in the world and work stuff out in a sort of almost like a sandpit environment. Really helpful, and I think it just improves your storytelling too. So I think for me, Yeah, novel writing is actually really, really difficult, and anyone that thinks otherwise is deluded. I'm just going to say that as a statement here. So I do think actually it's beneficial in some respects to try different ways to storytell, and it does then reinforce things. So yeah, thoroughly recommend. Definitely worth trying if you haven't written before.
That's
Yeah.
technically how I started out my writing career. When I first started writing or learning to write, I joined a writing community called Writer's Block Discord, which still exists. And they used to run a weekly competition, a writing competition, to write 750 words based on a prompt. And I used to do that like every week religiously. Would have a little voting competition. It got very serious. And it's a really good way to teach yourself how to self-edit, how to kind of like express yourself in such a limited amount of words. It's really, really good. And I don't do that anymore. I write chunks. So I've kind of like gone the opposite direction now. But it is such a good way of kind of learning how to self-edit and to kind of try and keep within a word count, which I just don't do anymore. But yeah, it's good.
Awesome. Comment in from Thomas. So Thomas, probably similar boat to what I've been in today. Wanted to reorient himself after setting aside a novella to work on a short story for a bit and returning feeling a bit lost. 200 words in, fantastic. And Thomas remembers what he's doing now, which is always a good thing.
Good thing.
I can
In
relate to that.
storytelling
So
and in life. Okay, so we have got one more 25-minute sprint. No pressure, guys, but this is the last one. So you do need to completely finish your projects with this one and have them ready for publishing by the end. Joking, of course. But if we're all ready, we'll go for our third and final sprint. Everyone who's watching, good luck with what you're doing with your projects, and we will see you on the other side. We are into the last minute of our last sprint of the day. Give everyone a couple of seconds to wrap up sentences, get to the end of paragraphs, cross those T's and dot those I's. Okay, I think we're going to call it there. Going to give a little shout out just to the wonderful music of Alan Stroud there. Really appreciate him letting us use that for our sprints. We're done. How does everyone feel?
Pretty good.
Amazing.
Yeah, it's good.
Well done, guys. Well done. We've got Alex has joined us in the chat. Hi, Alex. Nice to see you here. Hope you've been working on something today. Going to give a little shout out as well. Alex has actually dropped his debut novel on the 30th of September. So it's just come out in the last week. Carpentry in the Elven Forest. That is available now for people to go and check out. Let's do a quick wrap up because I'm aware we're running a little bit over time, but not that I mind because I have nothing better to do in my time. But these are very busy people who have busy lives to be getting on with. Tim, let's have a quick wrap up, quick summary of your experience today.
Yeah, no, it was good, productive. So yeah, I finished reviewing The Foundling, so that's the first of those 4 short stories done, and I'm just about 2 pages off finishing The Choice, which is Randall's backstory. So again, that's actually a bit of some bits of a novel I couldn't keep. I couldn't use it in the final book, but I've been able to find a way to bring it back into the omnibus edition and sort of shape a story around it properly now. So yeah, been having a lot of fun rereading that and tidying it up. So yeah, it's been productive.
Awesome. Tru, how did you get on?
Yeah, I wrote just under 1,000 words there, I think. I wasn't really keeping track. But I wrote a little small creepy scene, so I've ended it at a good place there, so I can now go and enjoy some crumpets or something. So that's my afternoon sorted.
I like the reward of crumpets. I think that's a very good plan.
Have to reward yourself.
Of course.
You're not wrong.
Ronit, how about you? How did you get on?
About 2,400 words in and 2/3 of the way done with the short story. So I might actually continue writing after the stream.
That's good work.
Yeah, definitely. I'm clocking in today at 1,400 words. I actually stopped writing about a minute before we finished there, just because I got to 1,400, and that felt like a really nice, clean place to leave it. Similar to Tru as well. Little bit of a creepy, scary vibe going on. So if you did see me looking over my shoulder, it's because my shed's a bit creaky and writing scary stuff whilst having creaky noises in the background. Not the best, not the most relaxing. Everyone who's been watching, please do let us know quickly before we wrap up. Fraser's going to go and eat some cake to celebrate. I mean, I find it hard to believe that Fraser's not already eating cake, to be perfectly honest. But we do have a lot more stuff coming on today, so I'm going to quickly run through what is happening on the big indie weekend. At 3 o'clock, we have a new video dropping, which is our Fusion of Fiction and History panel with some wonderful authors talking about history, folklore, and how that can all be used to enrich your storytelling. 5 o'clock, we have got a audio drama writing workshop from the fabulous team at Alt Stories. And then at 7 o'clock, we're going live again. I will be talking to some authors about assembling the A-team. So we're talking about your editors, proofreaders, cover artists, beta readers, how to put all that together. And then from 9 o'clock, you will all be relieved to hear that Fraser Armitage will be back to host our Building a Platform panel, which will be talking about the indie community, how you can be a part of it, and how it can enrich your author experience. Before we shoot off, I'm going to let all of my lovely guests tell us a little bit about where their books can be found, what you should definitely be buying from them, and what they've got coming up next. So let's start once again with Tim Hardy.
Yeah, so you can find me on pretty much all social media platforms. I'm on X, Facebook, Instagram, and Blue Sky as well. If you want the links and things, I'm generally a combination of Tim Hardy author. So if you look for that, I normally pop up. And that, you can also find all those details on my website, which is timhardyauthor.co.uk, which has everything created together. Yeah, so if you want to check out my work and stuff, you can have a look at The Brotherhood of the Eagle. That's a Viking-inspired fantasy series, 4-book series that I've recently completed. Or if you prefer a standalone, I've written a book called A Quiet Vengeance, which has a Middle Eastern, North African vibe, although it's set in the same fantasy world. So that's also available at the moment as well. So yeah, go and check out my website and you can find all the links there.
Awesome. Tru, where can people find you and your work?
Yep, you can find me and my books on trudyskies.com. I'm also on Blue Sky and around. My indie website is readindyfantasy.com, and you can find me on there too. I'm currently writing my book, which is The Chosen One Con. I'm actually launching a crowdfund campaign for that in November, on November the 12th, as part of the Book Bazaar. So do go on Backit and look for the Book Bazaar. You'll find loads of different indie projects. I think there's like 25 projects on there that are all going to be crowdfunding their indie books. So definitely check those campaigns out.
Amazing. That sounds good. And Ronit, what about you? What have you got coming up and where can people find your books?
I don't have any upcoming book, but you can buy my books on Amazon, and the printed copies are available across Barnes and Noble and everything. You can find me on ronatjauthor.com or ronatjauthor on any of the social media, be it Twitter, Threads, Blue Sky, YouTube. Yeah. And if you want to read my books, you can either check out Help My Dog is the Chosen One, which is a light-hearted urban fantasy book about anxiety, and it's a twist on the chosen one trope where the dog is the chosen one. Or you can check out my horror grim dark fantasy called Island of the Dying Goddess. And if you want bite-sized fiction, then you can check out my anthology, Abandoned by the Gods. You can sign up to my newsletter on my website and you can get a free ebook.
Awesome. And as you should already know by now, if you've watched these before, Spotlight Indie, you can find us on all the socials, so Instagram, Blue Sky, Facebook, and X. We're also at spotlightindie.co.uk. You can find my books on Amazon if you want to go and check them out. And we wanted to say, again, thank you to our guests for joining us. Thank you to everyone in the audience for writing along. It is such a wonderful thing to bring people in the indie community together to write and just spend a bit of time talking and just enjoy this wonderful community that we've built. Anyway, I'm rambling, so let's bring this to an end. We will see you at 7 o'clock live for assembling the A team, but until then, goodbye. Bye.